Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jay.
This is a phenomenal turnout. Thank you all so very, very much. This is definitely a great testament to the work that Breighlynn has been doing here at Shadows for the last year. Yes, for the last year. And so welcome to the opening of the second side. The first exhibit curated by Breighlynn Polk. But the journey to today's program actually began 30 years ago with the creation of the Oral Traditions class at New Iberia Senior High. This course, a partnership between Iberia Parish Schools and Shadows that ran for about 15 years, focused on African American history and involved not only classroom instruction, but also notable guest speakers and field trips. The students' culminating project was a recorded interview of a family member, so an oral history interview. Eventually, the class was expanded to include students at Westgate High School and Jeanerette Senior High School. Ultimately, over 250 interviews, and that's a really conservative estimate, were completed. The recordings offer a wealth of information and insight into the history of New Iberia and Iberia Parish. History that much of the community is not aware of and that needs to be shared and told as part of exploring the full and inclusive history of this area. But the interviews were done in the 90s, and so they're all on cassette tapes. Oh. And as you are probably well aware, technology gets outdated as soon as it is created. And that digitization process takes time and money. Luckily, we, Shadows, were the recipient of a Museums for America grant through IMLS, the Institute for Museum and Library Services. It's this grant that has allowed us to purchase digitization equipment that is also contributing to the first files that are being added to the Iberia African American Historical Society Center for Research and Learning. All right. And so Breighlynn has spent the last year working to digitize about 70 of these interviews. And just so that you know, this digitization process happens in real time. So if the cassette tape is 5 minutes, it only takes 5 minutes. If the cassette tape is an hour and a half, it's going to take an hour and a half. Wow. So lots of time. And so some of these are currently available on our website as part of this exhibit. Eventually, the interviews will be added to the online archive attached to the Center for Research and Learning. And we will continue to work on digitizing the remaining recordings. And so we are beyond thankful that Breighlynn contacted us a year ago to ask about a possible intern experiences as she began the work for her capstone project. And this initial contact came through the contact us link on our website, so she had no idea where it was going to end up. But at the time, we did not know that it would lead to this wonderful exhibit and this great program that she has put together. And so I think it's the perfect way to showcase not only the interviews and the wealth of information that they hold, but it's also a testament to the hard work that Breighlynn has done this year. And so, I guess I should have started off with interviewing myself. But so my name is Jade Buteau, and I'm the marketing and program manager here at Shadows-on-the-Teche. And I will actually turn things over to Breighlynn so that she can run the rest of this afternoon's program.
All right, so thank you all again for being here. I want to be more formal. Thank you. We do have some speakers who are going to come up and share some reflections about the course as Jade stated. This did start. Sorry, can you hear me now? Yes. Perfect. Not used to like. This did start within the Iberia Parish school system. So we do have some people who either participated, were involved in the creation of the course, or who took the course, who will also speak about their reflections about the course and the importance of it as well. So first we have Dr. Toby Daspit. Dr. Toby Daspit is currently the head of the Department of Educational Curriculum and Instruction at the University of Louisiana, Lafayette. A Lafayette Parish School System alumnus, Toby enrolled in the University of Southwestern Louisiana, and after 1 year in pre-law, realized that teaching was a passion that could really make a difference with another passion, political activism, and changed his major to social studies education. He was the outstanding graduate of the College of Education and began his teaching career as an English/social studies teacher of the gifted in 1989 in Iberia Parish. In 1993, he received his Master's of Education in Secondary Education with a minor in gifted education. After 6 years of teaching American literature, middle school English, African American studies, and world philosophy, Toby received a graduate assistantship to pursue his Ph.D. in curriculum and instruction at the Louisiana State University, where his concentration was curriculum theorizing. He completed his doctoral work in the fall of 1998 and was appointed assistant professor of teaching, learning, and leadership at Western Michigan University, where he worked for 6 years and was promoted to associate professor. Toby returned to UL Lafayette in 2004 as an assistant professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. Dr. Daspit joins us today as a teacher who began the oral traditions class. Dr. Daspit.
Wow, 30 years in the blink of an eye, it feels like. And this is just amazing to see. So thank you all for asking me to say a few words today. I can't wait to check everything out and hear what some people I haven't seen in a while have been up to. This is how I remember it. I was just talking to Heck Keel to make sure my memory was accurate. So first of all, I was a scrawny little high school teacher, about half the size I am now. I'm from Lafayette, but Iberia Parish welcomed me in 1989, and so grateful that happened. I was doing my graduate coursework, and I become reacquainted with Carmelite Blanco, who is the mother of one of my best friends, Paul Johnson, and actually ended up going to tutor one of her sons. And she had come across in a community program work that Shadows was doing on being more inclusive. And I believe they had involved Dr. Rex Ellis from the Smithsonian in that process. And in one of our courses, she pitched this idea of sort of a mentoring program where young people could come to Shadows-on-the-Teche and engage. As you all know, it's the most documented plantation house in the United States, but over 17,000 planters versus, I think. And it just sort of, you know, was like, great idea, but I had no idea that Carmelite was going to help to make sure that there was teeth to it. So one day, Bernadette Derwin, who is the director of special education, called me in with Tony Norbert, who was the head of the gifted ed program, and said, we would like you to work with staff from Shadows-on-the-Teche, and specifically that was Pat Cato and Jamie Cradle, who was, I guess, the education coordinator, might have been her title, in creating an African American studies course. And I'll have to admit, I was a little taken aback. Why are you asking me to help with an African American studies course? But they understood my passion for history, my passion for education, and little did I know that it was going to set me on a personal trajectory with oral. I didn't even know what oral history was. I had no idea. And honestly, it was Rex Ellis who had given us the idea that, you know, we understand you want to tell a more inclusive story about Iberia Parish and about the Shadows, but you want to start with more recent history. And so in that very first year, 1992 to 93, and when I say it was a collaboration, Pat, Jamie, and I met every single week. We had a group of, I believe it was 7 students that first year. It grew to about 14 the next year. I can't quite remember the third year that I worked with it. 12, I think, or so. And we definitely embraced it as a pilot endeavor because none of us knew where it was heading. I spent the whole summer learning as much as I could reinforcing what I knew already about history, but specifically about African-American history, and specifically about Iberia Parish, which, again, I lived in Lafayette, drove here every day for 6 years, but I needed to learn a lot. And I believe the students would tell you that we learned together. 3 days a week at senior high, 2 days a week we bussed over here to the Shadows. I have no idea how Bernadette Derwent did this, but she gave us $5,000 a year to bring in national speakers. We brought in Rex Ellis. We brought in Dorothy Redford, is that her name, with the Somerset Homecoming, and one from South Carolina.
Veronica Gerald.
There we go. Those were those first 3 years. Set up a professional development model that I use to this day, which was they worked, here's Rex Ellis, the director of programming at Smithsonian, doing a workshop with 7 high school students. And I still remember his words to those young people because it affected me so much when he said, if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. They won't be quite as generous in how they tell that story. That's what all of this is about, are people telling their stories. And then we do a workshop with teachers. And I remember that first year with Rex, but I think we had to move the program from the library to the church because we had over 200, I believe, community members. It revolutionized the way I saw education because it brought to light everything that sort of theoretically I believed in. But I'll tell you this, the heart of it were the young people in the class who took a chance on something that not sure they quite knew what they were getting into. I use this as a model in every class I teach. When I say that, you know who did this history? High school students. It wasn't me. It wasn't staff at the Shadows. We facilitated, we helped, but it was the young people. And the thing about oral history is it's a joint publication because it's the person doing the interviewing. Of course, it's the person who was interviewed. And those interviews, the study of school desegregation, 1969. I remember all those trips to the library, digging into the archives. And so it began as a dream of Carmelite Blanco, and we lost her way too early. It was in the 3rd year of the project that she suddenly passed away. So I always want to remember that she helped to found this, but the true energy of this project were the young people who embraced a challenge that I haven't seen this done in many places in the country. A former professor of mine, Patrick Slattery, put this project in a book he was writing in 1993. I was taking a graduate course with him, and he heard about it, and he said, this is a perfect example of what's called process philosophy. Still don't know what that means exactly, but he meant it. Just last year, he was introducing me in a get-together at LSU, former students and faculty, and he singled out this project. And he said, I want y'all to be aware that in New Iberia, Louisiana, in 1992, something was started that the rest of the country is just catching up to now. And so the things that are happening at Whitney Plantation, for example, these young people were exploring those topics years before. It really was groundbreaking. So appreciate all the work that you have done. I'm so excited to be here and I'm ready to learn more. And from a university perspective, our plan is to get involved, re-involved with the project. What a perfect time to do an oral history of this oral history project. So you'll be hearing from me and my students soon. So thank you, Billy. Appreciate it.
So next we have, I'm going to introduce them together because I think they want to come up. But we have Mrs. Nichelle Eddie Worick and Mr. Brian Worick Sr. Mrs. Nichelle Eddie Worick graduated from New Iberia Senior High in 1995 and was a student of Dr. Toby Daspit in the African American Studies course in the beginning years of its development. During her time in the course, Mrs. Worick interviewed notable community members, which included Mr. J.B. Henderson and her grandmother, Mrs. Lorenza Romance, both of whose interviews are included in our current database. Currently, Mrs. Worick continues to work with students in Iberia Parish at Westgate High School in the Sped Inclusion Department, as well as a sponsor of the Westgate Sparklers Dance Team. And Mr. Brian Worick Sr. is also a 1995 graduate of the Iberia Senior High School and also took the course with Dr. Daspit in his beginning years. During his time in the course, he interviewed Reverend Breighlynn Robertson, whose interview is also included in our current database, and there are pictures of both of them in the picture roll there as well. Currently, Mr. Ward works at Halliburton, and without further ado, interview him, and can come up and speak about your experiences.
Good afternoon. 30 years. Breighlynn was the flower girl in our wedding.
All right.
Miss Pat attended our wedding, so we made a little family. And back in '92, we started off in fine arts survey class. We didn't like it, and we was able to get the opportunity to leave. I mean, it was boring. And so we was able to get the opportunity to be presented to an African-American studies class. Who was like, oh yeah, that's gonna be easy, that's about us. Well, we were one of the 7, well, 2 of the 7 that was there. And here comes this slim white guy. White shirt on, if I remember correctly, some khakis. And he put the books down and he was like, well, everybody looked like, what they gonna teach us about us? But little did we know it was gonna be a journey that not only changed our lives, but we're making history with it. I mean, every Tuesday and Thursday, we will bus to the Shadows to where we were able to actually take in knowledge and the interviews, all of that. It brought us beyond the Harriet Tubman and the Sojourner Truth history. We were able to learn of trendsetters right here in our hometown and history, because back in the day, people of our color were not able to even walk down Main Street, let alone us at the Shadows doing research and able to do everything. And to be able to sit down with Mr. Henderson in his home and take in the knowledge that he poured into me and listening to the history of my grandmother, seeing a different aspect of her. That right there, it opened up our eyes and it let us see that, hey, this is not just Mr. Henderson, this is not just your grandmother, this is history and it needs to continue.
Well, this was a nice turnout. I just want to say that I wasn't expecting that many people, but I mean, here today, so that's a blessing. But from my part, my perspective, it was more so of the experience. It was the experience, just to be a part of a program, part of a movement, which I didn't think it was. I mean, just to look up at today, I mean, it was a movement,
right?
Just to be a part of that. That was just a great experience just to be a part of it. I mean, like she said, I mean, it was like a field trip. We come to school and was eager and ready to be in the class. Like she said, 2 days out of the week, we'll go right there and discuss certain things every Tuesday and Thursday. But it was so much just, like I said, it's the feeling of it, the feeling. Of course, it was 30 years ago, so I don't quite remember everything that took place. But for the most part, I wanted to focus more on that, just the feeling of it, just to be a part of that. At that time, that wasn't going on. No. And I think it needs to continue. We need to find a way to continue to implement it within the high schools. It's very important that we know history, especially when it comes down to, like you said, the local things that goes on around here. Like you said, at one time, we couldn't even walk down the Main Street. My dad, he tells me some stories about some things, my mom also too. And just to be able to do those things today, to be able to speak in front of you all of it, I count it a blessing. I just thank God just to give me the opportunity to be able to be in front of everybody today and to speak on this today. But it's a blessing.
So for your reflections on the class. So next with Carrie Natalie, we have Mrs. Elaine Polk Campbell. You all may know that. Elaine, commercial Polk. So Mrs. Elaine Polk Campbell, and she is my cousin. Family. Mrs. Elaine Polk Campbell is a lifelong resident of Nigeria and is known around the community as an advocate for Black excellence. During her childhood, she attended Lucky Elementary School in Houston, Texas, and the Iberia Parish Training School. Majoring in social studies and English, Mrs. Campbell attended universities that included Southern University, Los Angeles City College, University of South Louisiana, which is now ULL, and Louisiana State University. After completing college, she worked as an educator in schools throughout the Iberia and St. Mary parishes, where she taught for over 60 years. Aside from her work as an educator, Mrs. Campbell was devoted to the advancement and equal treatment of African Americans, where she worked as a president of the New Iberia chapter of the NAACP and worked on the William Jones case, as well as fought in the struggle for civil rights within the Iberia parish school system. Mrs. Campbell continued to bridge the gap to acknowledge Black excellence within the corridors of New Iberia's Black community after recognizing the minimal mention of African Americans in the local newspaper. Mrs. Campbell founded the Ebony Journal, Iberia Parish's first Black-owned newspaper since Reconstruction, which she published for 20 years. Covering events and interviewing Black people in communities across Acadiana, Mrs. Campbell was determined to give a vision and hope to African Americans while highlighting the amazing things that were taking place in their environment. And Ms. Campbell,
Good afternoon, Acadiana.
Good afternoon.
We've come a long way. I'm only 89 years old. But I was 90 in February.
Okay.
I came up here with this book. I taught school 63 years.
Wow.
And I read it every day.
Amen. Had to.
I enjoy life. I enjoy living. And every morning, I greet the sun when I unbuckle the curtains in my kitchen
Amen.
and I say good morning. Good morning. I finished from Foley High in General. It wasn't named Foley thing though. It was named General College High.
Lord.
And my cousin Matthew French was the principal. And we left here every day. And we went to General until I finished high school in General. But I'm here today to speak about the conditions that we went through during those days. I quote Jeremiah 1:5.
All right.
In this book, it says, before you were born, I knew.
Yes, yes.
Before you came out of that womb, I set you apart
Yes.
as a prophet. The next. I didn't know what that meant. So I looked up Isaiah 1, 2, and 7, and it says, you shall speak my word, whether they hear or whether they reject it. We're gonna speak it anyway. And then I had a dream. So I went up to Polk office in General. And there was a minister there, and I asked him to call the minister who was the teacher there. And I said, I have to tell you all this dream. God spoke to me that when I was in school. And he told me, I want you to, and that was it. So I asked Prof. Polk and the minister, what did he mean? What? Do what? But I had already asked my brother. He didn't know. I think I was right name. And you know what he told me? He said, "I want you to go in the kitchen and wash those." All the Lord asked me to do. He didn't have to tell me that. Mom was gonna make me do that. But that's the kind of time I had with him. So I asked the principal and the minister, and they couldn't answer that. And they told me, if he told you that, he will direct you. And through 63 years teaching it, and I enjoyed all of it. I taught in Patterson 4 years. I taught at Henderson 10 years before we integrated. And I taught at Westgate. Well, we went to Westgate after we integrated. We went to Westgate at Henderson. Henderson was changed to Westgate. And after they integrated the schools, they sent me to New Iberia Senior High School. I taught that too. Then after I retired from New Iberia Senior High School after 30 years, I went to Anderson. 29 years, I enjoyed that too. But my hair started getting gray. And I told myself, if any of those kids would say anything about my gray hair, I would probably kill one. Instead of sitting at home as I'm doing now in that rocking chair, I'd be in jail spending the rest of my life. But I enjoyed teaching. And when I was at Westgate, a lady came to my classroom. She was taller, or as tall as that, whatever that is holding up that roof. And her son was as tall as that, whatever's holding up that roof. And he and she were white. And she told me, she said, Ms. Campbell, if you can keep my son the way you have it, you can go to Dallas. Most of you probably won't know anything about that.
We know Dallas.
Too young. But you can go to Dallas and buy anything you want. And I told her, I answered her. I said, yes, I want all of it. That is anything that I want. I can pay for it and buy it myself. Your son and anybody else that crossed this film, they're gonna pay attention.
Yes, yes.
I'm being paid to do this job. The Lord hasn't made a child yet that I'm going to let change. That is what I have promised to the parents of these children. And even the principals would bring parents to borrow. And you don't have to worry about that, not here. And I enjoy it. just left, as I said, because my hair was getting gray. But we've gone through a lot. But I've always carried this with me.
Yeah.
I was never afraid of anybody. As short as I am.
That's because you're big.
I was never afraid of anybody. I would come on Main Street. We couldn't try on clothes in these stores. That didn't bother me. I would look at the clothes. I wasn't gonna buy them. But I would look because I always like to know what's available. That's why I watch NBA, NFL, Gunsmoke, and CNN. I want to know what's going on. And people, why are you so serious? I say, because that's my job. The Lord has me here to stand up, speak up,
Yes.
and change it. If it's going on, know about it.
Yeah.
And you can't know about something you don't experience. And I experienced it. I came on Main Street. One little guy who was up in the Destiny when it was on Main Street, he called me, when I was leaving the NAACP in the parade, he said, "You're here in my gun." Did I said, "Why you did this?" Yeah, I don't know. I said, "Well, I can tell you why. The Lord didn't intend for you to do that." But I've always been a Bible student. Cain killed him. What is wrong with people? It's not the color of your skin. It's not how much money you have. It is not. God didn't send you here for that. He sent you here to make this world better.
Right.
Before you were born.
Right.
He placed you in that womb. You're
Right.
supposed to be doing his job, not yours. There is no such thing. And looking at all of these people in here and all of the people I work with, and someone I spoke about Black history in these schools. When I was at New Iberia Senior High School, Ms. Joanne Acock was the assistant principal.
Yes.
And I asked her if she thought they would allow me to teach Black history. And she told me she thought they might, but she would go and talk it over with Mr. Bronson. And she did. And I started teaching African American history, but we called it Black history, at New Iberia Senior High School.
Amen.
And after I retired in 2009, Mrs. Erna Lovett continued teaching that class. If you don't understand people, the Lord didn't send you here to be a crook. He sent you here because he wants to see how you are going to work effectively to make this world what he wants it to be. It's his footstool.
Amen.
He's looking at you. People don't believe that because they don't believe the Bible.
Mama.
Before you were born. He sent you here for a purpose, not just to sit around, watch them smoke and NBA all day. But you have a real job to do.
Yeah.
You can do all of those things, but you have to help because the kids are watching what you do.
That's right. That's right.
I love everybody. And even though we went through those things, Mr. Henderson, and they ran those doctors out of town,
Mm,
that hurt my heart.
mm,
Dr. Williams was our doctor,
mm,
Dr. Darcy too,
mhm,
and Lord Springella Balder was my 5th grade teacher.
mhm.
And we did some crime when they ran them out of town.
Mama.
It was such a thing, but we were so young. We didn't understand how cruel people can be. But white people were not the only cruel people. Look around in your family. And that's where we make the mistake because we think it's just this color or that color. And today,
Talk about it.
I went overseas because I had to experience the Jewish people. Christ was born in a Jewish family. And I couldn't understand what are these people talking about? What's going on? First, and as for Hitler, excuse me, I'm sorry, you all are young, you don't understand. I couldn't understand Hitler at all. Gestapo. And now we have another one.
You know.
Definitely great. And we have one here in America. He's trying to get Zach in that president. I don't understand how people think like that. The Lord made all of us.
Hmm.
And it's the content of your character that is important, not your color. You can call that church a Jehovah. You can say Jehovah Witness. You can say Baptist. You can say Methodist. You can say Catholic. And out there, the teacher went especially. Miss Harris, Elizabeth Harris. We taught school. And
Hmm.
we taught school when Henderson became Westgate because it was Henderson first. Then we went to Library Senior High. We taught there. And she was one of the finest persons that I knew.
Hmm.
But this Jewish business, the Lord made people. He made one, a woman, a man first, and then that woman. And after that, it started. And it hasn't changed since. We got to find a way to hate each other. And Lord, I'm 90 years, almost 90. And I said, well, what is wrong with people? They still killing each other. And not just white against black or Jew against this one. I want people. Because those little kids, those little black kids with all of these guns hurting my heart. And I just suffer every time I hear it. And one lady that I used to talk with, she had a house on Hopkins Street. Corner house. And I would turn to go to Anderson. And I would wave at her. These young men with a gun. shooting at each other,
Mama.
killed her. And she wasn't even in that. So that lady didn't have a chance to live, to be nice.
Mm.
I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. I walked to Main Street, couldn't try on clothes. I walked to school every morning, didn't matter how cold it was, white kids were on the bus, that didn't bother me. My mama had those peach tree switches. And she was a practical nurse at Gold Tree Hospital, helping them birth those babies. And we couldn't go to Gold Tree. But that has changed. But it's a part of my history. But I still love Gold Tree. I walk 3 times a week around the bayou. And they say, oh, sure, don't never you. I said, oh, sure, that's not try to never me. The Lord hasn't made any child yet that I'm supposed to be afraid of. And I'm not. I'm not afraid of anybody. I love everybody. Whether they love me back or not. Stand tall. Be true. That's what he sent you here to make his world better, not worse. What is wrong with people? And it hasn't changed. What year is this? 2022. And you go back all the way to the beginning of this book. How have we changed? Not much. Now, I'm not saying everybody is like that. But too many people are. So, but he said he's coming back.
Yes, yes, yes.
And he has his reward. It will be with him. The kids, there were teachers who taught with me. They didn't, some of those science teachers, they don't believe this. And I used to be tickled because they laughed at what's in this book. So I laughed at them. We laughed at each other. Say what you want. And then one of them told me, he said, but you know what? I'm so glad my wife and my sister believe. I said, yeah, but they can't die for you. But anyway, I was born in a segregated society. That didn't bother me, you know. Doesn't bother me now. I'm 90 years old and I'm almost 90 and I still walk all the way around the bayou test and I enjoy looking at it. Even though if we wanted to buy something, we would go to school and there was an ice house. I don't know if the ice house is still there or not, but there was an ice house because we came from across the bayou to go to IPTS. That was before Jonas Anderson High. It was IPTS, Iberia Parish Training School. And Prof. A.B. Simon was the principal. And we couldn't drink at that fountain, at those drinking parts, because, well, we could, but they had white painted on one and black painted on the other, that not be caught drinking. And of course, if you wanted to catch a train to go to Texas, because a black kid go west, but anyway, you wanted to catch a train. Yeah. You let you guys come in here. but you can't see on the same side. There goes my people are saying. I said, why not? We're wrong. We got the money, but take it. Yeah, but you just can't do that, you're not. I said, well, I know I'm black. That's my color. That's not me. The people think that's you. Well, anyway, we would cross the track and boy, I don't know. This year, it has been a little different, but back then, those winters were cold. And we had to walk to school. And those other kids were on the bus and throwing at us. Wow. They're on the bus riding to school. We walking, it's cold. And they were throwing at us out. That tickled me too, because I was third grade. On the bus. And they ride, and they want to hurt us. We didn't be throwing at them. But we never did. Prof. Simon wouldn't allow it. Because they had those straps at school. You anytime. Anytime. They thought you were doing something wrong. They had to correct it. And Katie Sims knew how to handle the strap. From Simon too, knew how to handle the strap. All of them, they had to. But in all of that, we made it. My sister, I think they have her name up here as Elaine, but her name is Melvina Polk. Not Elaine. She's sitting up there next to me. She was a coach at Campbell. And she finished at Anderson when we integrated. When we integrated these schools, the black kids didn't want to stay at New Iberia Senior High School. They went all the way back. They went back to what is now Westgate, but they went back. And the police had to, it was a riot on the highway because the children were on the highway. They were going back. But when we renamed those schools, a lot of those schools had black people names on them. Nope. No, that's, you couldn't send those kids, the white kids to school with a black man name on them. So they changed them. Started naming them by street names. Because what we gonna think of next. But of course, a lot of people doing the thinking, a lot of that I wouldn't have been able to think of. But that was the idea. No way we're gonna send those kids to a school with a black man name on it. So they changed all the school names. So we had to get used to that too. New names on those schools. And some of them I still can't remember what those names were or what they are now. Lucky Elementary and all of this. Hallelujah. But these are the people that I grew up with and admired all of them because they were relentless. The Lord sent all of us here with a purpose. You too have a job to do. And you have to go out and kill people to show strength, resilience. I have never killed a person in my life. But do good. even to your family members. And some of those kids, what they go through with some mom and dad, that's a shame. It doesn't make sense. And you know what it shows, you don't like yourself. And I always liked myself with my mama Peachtree switches. I never wanted that on my back, and she never had to lift me. And the son she loved, that's the one she had to whip the most. And he was so good. Of course, all of us graduated from high school and college in my family, except him. And you know how he died? When my uncle, who lived in Texas, I went to Lucky Elementary, I finished there. I went to Jack Yates too. But when I went to Lucky Elementary, I lived with my uncle. But things were so bad here for black boys. My uncle came from Texas. He took all the black boys. He was a farmer in Houston. He took all the black boys on Johnson Alley, and he took them with him to Houston. That's how bad it was here. I didn't understand what was going on myself. And, you know, I didn't want anybody to explain that to me. But he took them all and brought them with him to Houston. And when I went to Houston, I was just going there, you know, just to be there. But he said he wanted me to stay a while. And that's when I enrolled at that elementary school in 3rd Ward, Lucky Elementary. And I enjoyed that too. And then I went to Jack Yates in Houston. I enjoyed that too. But I was scared at Jack Yates because those children would jump the fence to get out of that, out of the school, so they wouldn't have to go to class. Jump the fence, not to go to class. Lord, that's what my mama sent me here for. And he sure, it was tough. Oh yeah, those children in Houston were tough. I said, Mama, I want to come back home. So she brought me back home. They're safer here than over there. But I was scared of the school. And it was a good school too. The Davis Johnson, who taught math at that school, was taller than anybody in this room and bigger. And you didn't do anything in his class to get your best, especially that math. I said, oh Lord, more trouble than. But it's not people that you worry about. It's the person who this earth is his footstool. And he's watching and he's clocking everything that we do. And you think he's gonna let you control his world? Are you crazy? It's not gonna happen. Too many people tried to do it, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And it didn't happen yet. He's not gonna let you control his world. So you gotta straighten up. Because when he comes, you got to answer. You got to answer for it.
Amen.
And what? I've been preaching that. I've gone all over these churches in Acadiana, Lafayette, everywhere. Explain to people the Lord is coming back. But a lot of kids don't believe in the Lord anyway. And they think they can do anything they want to. But they get that from us. You don't really believe that. So how do you think it was made? What happened? How did all of this come together? Did Christ really die on a cross? Well, people killing each other like that now. And you still don't believe it happened to him? Like that? He did.
Amen.
Be a good kid. Just wait. Just wait. I hope I'm still here when he comes. I don't know. I don't know, but I talk to him every day
Amen.
and every night. It's done, hello. Cause I realize now, I'm still here.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Ms. Campbell, for your
Amen.
introduction. It's really
Amen.
great, to be able to hear someone who had participated in this interview still be here to be able to share their reflections as well. So I appreciate you for coming up. So lastly, I'd just like to give an overview about the exhibit that I have carried. I did write some stuff, but I think that I'm gonna actually like read and then talk in the top of my head. So bear with me. All right, so on behalf of the Shadows-on-the-Teche and the Iberia African American Historical Society, I would personally like to thank everybody for coming out on today and taking the time out to be here. As many of you know, like I said, I am Breighlynn Polk, the curator for the 75. And the panel here kind of explains where the name came from. Of course, you hear there's two sides to every story. And oftentimes around this area, you always hear like the Cajun version of stories, especially in Southwest Louisiana, is kind of overshadowed by Cajun culture or Creole culture. But then what you realize is in this area, there are a lot of people who don't identify as either one. So they kind of slip through the cracks of history. But with this project here, it kind of tells the side of their stories and their voices, because as someone said, you let somebody else tell your story, it won't be as inclusive of your experiences if you don't speak up for yourself. So I would like to first thank the Shadows-on-the-Teche for giving me the opportunity and a platform to do this work. My research did not originally start off with this project. I was actually trying to make a documentary, which is still coming. I have been doing my own interviews as well. But I was able to kind of highlight these interviews because it has a lot of rich history about things that, like Ms. Campbell spoke about, a lot of people don't really know about, especially with traditional history. If it isn't written, people think that it didn't happen. But the language of Black people has always been storytelling. A lot of the history, whether it's at backyard barbecues or how I like to say, I learned a lot of history from church parking lots after church. People just talking about things that have been happening through their experiences in their childhood. That's history making, but people don't think of it as that because, again, most history, for it to be credible, it has to be written. So like I said, prior to beginning this work, I recognized a gap that tends to exist when you're researching an area that may fall under the category of small, southern, and rural. In places like Southwest Louisiana, like I said, the food, Cajun cooking, Creole lifestyles always kind of overshadows Black people who don't identify as any of those. So these interviews kind of exemplify their experiences. Like Jade said, there are over 250 interviews that were included in those tapes that were pretty much unearthed. I only did about 70. The current database does not include all 70, but if you look on your program, it does have the names of some of the people who are included in those interviews. And a way to kind of make this full circle, when I was doing my research, it wasn't really a lot of information that I could find on Iberia Parish, specifically Black people. But like I said, these tapes were presented to me to digitize so that it can not only be made available to people who are studying in out of state, as y'all know, I live in Atlanta, but it can also be made available to the people who are here as well. So in a nonprofit world, you kind of have to be creative with minimal funds. But if you look around the panel, you can kind of see the QR codes, which is in the age of COVID, things have kind of advanced with technology. So it gives you the opportunity to be able to hear those interviews for yourself in the comfort of your own home, or as you are visiting the exhibit, if you want to read the information and listen at the same time, kind of has that information there. Like I said, my research began, and I do have some family members who are here to represent her. My great aunt, Leona Charles Chapman, actually did an interview with me in 2016. And I kind of built on that research there. She talked about the union of her and her husband, and how at the time that she was raising her kids, of course, there were national reports that were basically saying that the Black family was ruined because the father was out of the household and the mothers were pretty much not really raising their sons to be sons, emasculating them. But with her experiences, she kind of contradicted that narrative and showed that she, raised her children with her husband in a Black family union in the West End, which was a predominantly Black environment, which was right now people think of it as unheard of, but it's still happening. So I wanted to kind of highlight those stories because, of course, in these Black neighborhoods around New Iberia, you don't really see excellence kind of like publicized because people think of it as low income, impoverished, crime inflicted. But as all of you are here, you're kind of testaments to that rich history that comes from those environments. So I won't keep you all too long. I just wanted to, work in progress. I just wanted to show you these panels. Each panel has a little bit of information about the topics that are highlighted at the very top. But it has information on those topics. You have local pictures from actual people who either took them or they were taken in Iberia Parish. And it has a lot of good information that can give you a little bit of a background of what it is that's being discussed in those interviews. So again, I would like to thank the Shadows-on-the-Teche for the opportunity. I know Dr. Phoebe Hayes is not here today. She's in New Orleans, but she is watching virtually. Definitely would like to thank her for all of the work that she has done with the Iberia African American Historical Society. I'm just gonna overlook that for right now. But definitely would like to thank her for the work that she has put in, the research that she is doing. And again, Jordan Richardson, he is the digital collections director, and he is in the back. There is a resource center that is upstairs. It is not open today, but definitely visit the website to get more information about what can be.
If they want to come up, they can come, they can follow that. So go around.
Okay, so yeah, there is a lot that is taking place upstairs as well. So if you want to venture up there, Jordan can let you guide you on the way.
And I add one thing about this Black history, where the courthouse is right now. That was a Black high school. That's where Mr. Anderson went to school.
Yes, I mean, you can see the pictures here. How Institute is a current day location of the Iberia Parish Courthouse. And the interviews that are included on this panel kind of speak to how that was lost and gained by the Iberia Parish Courthouse, and just what that center meant to them. So again, if you want to now take some time to just, I know it's kind of packed in here, we'll kind of maneuver around. But again, thank you all so much for coming, and I hope that you enjoyed the information.